My boyfriend made a laughingstock out of me in front of his friends. He called me ugly and left me. All right, here's my story. I, Mia, 28, was in a relationship with Zach, 30, for 2 years. From the outside, we looked like a totally normal couple. We watched shows together on the weekends, had Sunday dinners with our parents, took pictures at the pumpkin patch in the fall, and we even started planning to move to Portland that summer. We met through mutual friends at a game night, and we just clicked. Zach worked as a systems analyst, and I worked retail. Not glamorous, but I was good at it. Assistant store manager at a little boutique downtown. It paid okay, and I liked the people. Zach always made these little comments. That's how it started. At first, they seemed like harmless jokes. He'd say things like, "Wow, you wore that to work?" Or, "No offense, but you should think about wearing makeup more. You look tired." Stuff like that. I chalked it up to him being blunt. That was his personality, sarcastic, dry humor, a little edgy. I told myself it was better than being with someone fake. But the comments never stopped. They just shifted. When I got a bonus for hitting sales goals, I was thrilled. I told Zach over dinner, expecting him to be excited for me. Instead, he said, "Retail bonuses? What's that, like $50? We should celebrate at Dollar Tree." Then he laughed and kept eating like he hadn't just stomped on my day. Still, I brushed it off. I mean, he wasn't wrong. It was only $150. But it felt good to be recognized. I wanted him to see that, to see me. Instead, he made me feel stupid for being proud of it. He was good with my family, though. That's part of why it was so hard to see it clearly. My mom adored him. "Zach is so respectful," she'd say. "You're lucky, honey." And when we'd go to his parents' house, they treated me like one of their own. His mom even gave me a family recipe for chicken cacciatore. So when Zach joked about how embarrassing it was to tell people I worked retail, I laughed it off. I told myself it didn't matter what he thought. I liked what I did. But then came the Portland plan. We'd been talking about moving out of state for almost 6 months. Zach had a job offer lined up with a remote-first company, and I had already scoped out stores in the area that might be hiring. We picked out neighborhoods on Zillow, saved listings, made a shared Google document. It was real, or so I thought. One night in May, after we'd just gotten back from his friend's birthday dinner, he sat me down on the couch and said he had to be honest. That was his phrase. Always just being honest. He said, "I don't think Portland's a good idea anymore." I blinked at him. What? What? "I just think we're not really compatible long-term," he said. "You're not really going anywhere, Mia. And I don't want to get stuck supporting someone who's okay working in retail forever." He said it flat out. No hesitation. Like we were talking about bad weather. I asked him what he meant, where this was coming from. He said he'd been thinking about it for a while, that I didn't aspire to more, and he didn't want to resent me later. That's when I realized that everything, the jokes, the sarcasm, the subtle digs, it wasn't banter. It was disdain. I'd been dating someone who didn't even respect me. I told him to leave. I don't even remember the exact words. I just remember standing in the hallway while he packed a duffel bag, calm as ever, like he was heading to the gym. I cried for days. I didn't eat. I barely went to work. My boss noticed and gave me time off, something she didn't even have to do, but she did it because she cared. That's when it hit me. Zach saw retail as beneath him. He saw me as beneath him. But my coworkers didn't. My customers didn't. My boss sure as hell didn't. And the people in my life, the ones who actually knew me, they never treated me like I was disposable. I'd spent 2 years thinking I was in a safe, steady relationship. But it wasn't a relationship. It was an illusion, something he could discard the moment it didn't align with his 5-year plan. Zach finally invited me to dinner with his colleagues. That might not sound like a big deal, but for us, it was. In 2 years of dating, he had never once brought me into his professional world. I'd heard names, Jake, Travis, some guy named Amir who he said was too intense, but I'd never met any of them. So when he casually mentioned over coffee one morning, "Hey, we're all grabbing dinner Friday. Want to come?" I was honestly surprised. I said yes immediately. I was nervous, but also kind of excited. This felt like a step forward, like he was finally acknowledging me as part of his life in a real, grown-up way. I went all in. I spent money I shouldn't have spent on a new dress, something simple but elegant, dark green, fitted at the waist, a little off-the-shoulder detail that made me feel put together. I booked a makeup appointment too. It felt indulgent, but I wanted to look like I belonged there. These were his colleagues. I didn't want to show up looking like I just got off a retail shift. The restaurant was one of those places that didn't even list prices on the menu. Sleek marble, low lighting, fancy cocktails with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. I'd never been there before. Zach hadn't told me much, just sent me the reservation confirmation with a time, 7:30. I walked in at 7:33. Not on purpose. I called the Uber early, but traffic was a nightmare downtown. I texted him when I was 5 minutes away. No response. I figured he was just caught up in conversation. When I walked in, I saw him right away, already seated at a corner booth with two guys who looked exactly like what I imagined his colleagues would be, button-down shirts, confident postures, laughing like they'd just closed a deal. I started walking over, smiling, but Zach didn't wave or stand up. He didn't even make eye contact until I was right in front of them. He said, "Hey," with a tone that felt like I had just interrupted something. "This is Mia," he told them, barely glancing at me. I said hi and tried to shake their hands, but Jake, I think it was Jake, just gave me a nod, and Travis looked at me like he wasn't sure why I was there. I slid into the empty seat next to Zach, adjusting my dress that suddenly felt a little too tight. No one asked how I was or commented on how I looked. Zach didn't even say I looked nice. They were already drinking cocktails, halfway through an appetizer, deep into some story about a client who screwed up a presentation. I laughed when they laughed, even though I didn't understand half of it. Every time I tried to jump into the conversation, it was like I was speaking a different language. I'd say something, a light comment, a question, and it would just hang there, unanswered, until someone started talking over me. Zach didn't notice, or he did and chose not to care. At one point, Travis leaned toward Zach and said, "So, you finally brought someone." And the way he said it made me feel like a science experiment on display. Zach just smirked and said, "Yeah, figured it was time." Like I was a milestone, not a person. The waiter came and took my drink order. I asked for a glass of wine, not even bothering to ask the price. And when he left, Jake asked if I worked in fashion or something. I smiled and said, "Retail. I manage a boutique downtown." He nodded slowly, then turned to Travis and said, "Like my ex, she was in retail. Always smelled like perfume and stress." They laughed. I did not. Zach didn't defend me. He didn't even glance at me. He just kept eating. I don't remember much of the rest of the dinner. I remember trying to enjoy the food, even though my stomach was tight the whole time. I remember pretending I was cold so I could pull my shawl tighter and hide the fact that I wanted to leave. I remember the check coming and Zach reaching for it without hesitation, like this was just another night, and I was just another accessory. He didn't ask if I wanted dessert. He didn't ask if I had fun. On the ride home, he barely spoke. When we got back to his place, he turned on the TV and started scrolling on his phone. I sat on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, still in that green dress, makeup still fresh, heart sinking. He didn't look up. That was the night I realized something wasn't right. I wasn't his partner. I was someone he brought along to tick a box, to make himself look like he had it all together. That dinner wasn't an invitation. It was a test. And I'm pretty sure, in his mind, I failed at the moment I said retail. The moment I walked up to the table, still trying to smile through the nerves, Zach looked straight at me and said, loud enough for the entire section of the restaurant to hear, "You're wearing that?" I froze. I wasn't even fully seated yet. I had on a navy blue dress I'd picked out days earlier, mid-length, fitted but modest, with a soft neckline and subtle pleats. It was elegant, safe, the kind of dress you wear when you don't know the crowd but want to make a good impression. I had my makeup done professionally that afternoon, and I'd even spent an hour second-guessing my heels before finally deciding to wear them anyway. But in an instant, all that effort collapsed under one sentence. There was this half-second of silence where I swear I could hear a fork clink against a plate. Jake and Travis, the two colleagues I'd just met, looked at each other, then at me, then quickly back to their drinks. No one said anything, not even a joke to lighten the moment. Just silence, like everyone agreed it was awkward, but no one wanted to be the one to make it worse. I felt my face burn, my cheeks, my ears, even the back of my neck. It was like every drop of blood in my body had decided to rush to the surface. I didn't know what to say, so I just mumbled. I thought it was appropriate, and sat down slowly, hoping the booth would just swallow me. Zach didn't even look sorry. He just shrugged and said, "We already ordered," like I was late to some corporate lunch and not a dinner he'd specifically invited me to. He went right back to the conversation with Jake, something about a client messing up their contract review. No explanation, no warm-up, no small talk. I stared at the table. I hadn't even gotten a drink yet. They were eating appetizers, oysters, charred octopus, some expensive-looking bread I wasn't familiar with. The plates were half empty. The waiter came over and asked if I'd like to order anything, and I was so flustered I almost told him no. But I was starving, so I asked for a glass of wine and whatever they were having. I didn't even look at the menu. Zach didn't introduce me again, didn't ask about my day, didn't even look at me once the food came. That's when it hit me, really hit me, that I hadn't been invited to that dinner as his girlfriend. I wasn't there as a partner or an equal. I was a prop, something to fill the empty seat next to him, something to say, "See, I have a girlfriend," without actually giving me any space to be seen or heard. I remember sitting there, nodding along as they talked about things I didn't understand, contract workflows, something about client churn, Jake cracking a joke about intern energy, and Zach laughing harder than the joke deserved. I remember folding my napkin in half, then again, just to keep my hands busy. I remember smiling politely when someone glanced my way, even though I wanted to disappear. Every now and then, Zach would glance at me, but not like he was checking on me. More like he was checking that I was still playing along, still quiet, still presentable. I looked around that restaurant and realized something else, too. Everyone else, the other tables, the servers, even the couple seated behind us, seemed more comfortable than I was. And I was the one who dressed up, who planned, who tried. And for what? To be mocked before I could even sit down? That dinner was supposed to be a glimpse into Zach's world, and it was. Just not the one I thought I'd see. For the next hour, I might as well have been invisible. Zach held court like he was the star of a late-night talk show, bragging nonstop about his achievements at work. Campaigns he single-handedly turned around, clients who would have been lost without his strategy, quarterly numbers that, in his words, made his boss kiss his damn shoes. Jake and Travis hung on every word, laughing, nodding, chiming in with the occasional classic Zach, or you really saved their asses on that one. I sat there, smiling politely, trying to stay engaged, but it was obvious I wasn't part of the conversation. The one time I tried to chime in, just a small thing. I mentioned how funny it was that our friend Amanda had introduced us, that she'd joked about setting me up with someone who could argue about fonts for hours. I thought it was light, harmless. Instead, Zach rolled his eyes and said, Amanda just felt sorry for her. I did her a favor. The table exploded in laughter. Jake nearly choked on his wine. Travis leaned back and said, Damn, man. With this grin like Zach had just roasted me on national TV. I couldn't even fake a laugh. I just sat there, blinking, trying to process that the man I'd dated for 2 years, the man I thought might actually love me, had just dismissed me like I was a charity case. And in front of his colleagues, no less. I felt something shift inside me right then. Something hard and cold. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood up. Zach didn't ask where I was going. He barely looked at me. I told them I needed the restroom and walked away as steadily as I could. The moment I closed the stall door, I broke. My eyes welled up and I pressed the heels of my hands against them, trying to stop it, trying not to ruin my makeup. I stared at my reflection in the mirror for a long time afterward. Dress still perfect, lipstick still intact, hair exactly how the stylist had left it. I looked composed, but I felt like a fool. That dinner was never about including me. It wasn't about showing me off. It wasn't even about us. It was Zach's show, his spotlight, his ego trip. And I wasn't just in the background. I was the punchline. I was standing in front of the mirror, trying to pull myself together. My hands were shaking just a little as I dabbed under my eyes with a tissue, trying not to smudge the concealer too badly. The bathroom lighting was harsh, and every time I looked at my reflection, I felt like I was looking at someone else, someone smaller, someone who had let herself believe she mattered more than she did. That's when my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought maybe it was Zach, maybe a text checking on me, asking if I was okay, noticing that I'd left the table upset. But it wasn't a message. It was a notification from Instagram. Zach had posted a story. I didn't want to look. I knew better. But of course I looked. It was a picture of the table, taken from his side, Jake and Travis on either end, a couple of empty glasses, the edge of a steak plate. The caption said, Evening with the guys, followed by a beer emoji and the restaurant's location tag. I just stood there staring at it. I wasn't even in the frame. Not a shadow, not a wine glass, not the sleeve of my dress. Nothing. Like I hadn't even shown up. Like I was never there. I scrolled back to make sure I hadn't missed anything. Maybe he'd posted something earlier, something with me in it. But no, that was it. An evening with the guys. And I was sitting at that very table not 10 minutes ago. My stomach twisted. That cold, hollow ache bloomed in my chest again, only deeper this time. It was one thing to feel invisible at the table. It was another to know he wanted me to be. Just then, my phone lit up again. Amanda was calling. For a second, I almost answered. But my voice was shaking, and I couldn't risk it. I didn't want her to hear me like this. Not in that stall. Not with my breath catching and my eyes puffy and my chest heaving like I couldn't get air. So I just stared at the screen, at her name, until it went dark again. I leaned back against the wall and let the tears come. There I was, dressed up in a bathroom stall in a restaurant I couldn't afford, hiding from people who didn't even know I existed. And the person I came here for, the person I thought cared, was out there telling the world I wasn't even part of the night. When I finally walked back to the table, I felt like I'd aged 10 years in that bathroom. My face was composed enough, I think, but my hands still trembled slightly as I smoothed the napkin across my lap. No one asked if I was okay. No one even seemed to notice I'd been gone that long. The waiter came over a minute later and asked if I was ready to order. I didn't want anything at that point. My appetite had vanished somewhere between Zach's cruel comment about Amanda and that Instagram post pretending I didn't exist. But I couldn't sit there with nothing in front of me, not in that kind of restaurant. So I glanced at the menu and ordered the pasta. It was the cheapest thing I could find, and the only option that didn't feel overwhelming. The second the waiter left, Zach raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh, carbs? Are you planning to run a marathon after this?" He laughed, loud and casual, like we were in on some private joke. Jake chuckled too, and Travis smirked behind his wine glass. I didn't respond. I just gave a tight smile and folded my hands in my lap. But Zach wasn't done. "Bold choice with your body type," he added, as he took another bite of steak, chewing slowly like nothing about what he said was out of line. It was like a punch in the gut. I didn't even know where to look. I stared down at the table, blinking hard, and for the first time all night, I felt myself disconnect from everything around me. The noise of the restaurant, their voices, the clinking of cutlery, it all became this dull blur in the background. When my food arrived, it looked beautiful. Creamy pasta, perfectly plated. I stared at it for a long time. I picked at it, twirled a few strands onto my fork, but I never brought it to my mouth. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even really there anymore. Every part of me just wanted to leave, walk out, and never look back. But I sat there in silence, my plate untouched, listening to Zach talk about himself like he was the main character in a movie that had no space for anyone else. When the bill finally arrived, I was still sitting there in silence, staring at my barely touched pasta. The waiter set the check down gently, folded in a leather sleeve, and Zach reached for it like he always did. I assumed, for one brief second, that despite everything, he'd at least pay for the dinner he'd invited me to. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd try to end the night with some thread of decency, however thin. But no. He opened the bill, glanced at it, and then, without even lowering his voice, slid it across the table toward me. Then he leaned back, still relaxed, like this was a casual conversation. "You know what?" he said. "It's not working between us." I blinked. My fingers were still on my fork. "I'm not attracted to you anymore," he continued, his tone flat, almost bored. "We need to break up." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Then he added, louder this time, loud enough for the table behind us to hear, maybe even the server standing a few feet away. "A girl like you should be grateful that I was even with her." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like I'd been lucky just to sit across from him. Jake let out a low whistle. Travis gave a short, uncomfortable laugh, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to find it funny or not. And then, without another word, the three of them stood up, tossed their napkins onto the table, and walked out. Just like that. I sat there alone, mouth dry, heart racing, with the check sitting open in front of me. $340. I stared at the total for what felt like minutes, willing it to change, trying to process what had just happened. My stomach turned. The waiter came by a few moments later, giving me a look I couldn't read. Sympathy, maybe. Or just pity. I pulled out my card without saying a word, handed it to him with a shaking hand, and tried not to cry as he walked away. $340. For a night I never wanted to remember. When I got home that night, I dropped my purse by the door and collapsed onto the floor without even taking off my shoes. I just sat there against the wall, staring at nothing, the edges of the night blurring together. The restaurant, the bill, his voice, the way he just left, it all circled in my head like static. I don't even remember deciding to call Amanda. My fingers just found her name on my screen and hit dial. The second she answered with her usual bright, "Hey babe, what's up?" I broke down. I couldn't even get the words out at first. I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I told her everything. The dress comment, the Instagram story, the awful remarks about my body, and finally, how he broke up with me at the table, loudly, in front of his co-workers, and left me with the $340 bill like I was nothing. Amanda was silent for a moment. Then she said, slowly and with a cold edge I'd never heard in her voice before, "Mia, you should know that Zach is not who he says he is." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice thick and uneven. "He's not a project manager," she said. "He's an assistant. He works in marketing, yeah, but he doesn't manage anything. He literally books meetings, takes notes, and orders catering. That's it." I sat up straighter on the floor. "What? He tells everyone he's leading campaigns and building strategies, but it's a lie," she said. "Those presentations he always talks about, he didn't make them. He called in slides for his boss. That's it. He's not going on business trips. He takes PTO and goes to visit a friend in Seattle, drinks all weekend, and then comes back and acts like he's been at some conference." I couldn't speak. I felt like I was hearing about a stranger. I didn't say anything because I thought it didn't matter. Amanda continued, her voice hard now. "I figured if you liked him, whatever. People have different kinds of jobs, right? But now, After what he did to you, you need to know who you were actually with. I didn't even realize I was shaking until I looked down and saw my hands clenched into fists. All those nights he looked down on me for working retail, for managing a boutique, for being comfortable in my job. And he wasn't even who he pretended to be. He mocked me for being honest about what I did, while he built his whole image on a lie. That was the moment something inside me hardened. I had spent 2 years apologizing for not being enough for someone who was never anything real to begin with. At around 3 in the morning, after I'd cried until my eyes stung, and then just laid there in silence staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed again. I almost ignored it. I figured it was another spam notification or a delayed message. But then I saw the preview. Hi, I'm Kyle. I work with Zach. Amanda gave me your number. I have something to tell you. I sat up in bed. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the message, rereading it, trying to figure out if it was real or some horrible continuation of the night I'd just had. After a minute, I typed back, "Hey, what's going on?" His response came instantly. "I'm sorry it's so late. Amanda told me what happened and I don't know. I felt like you deserved to hear the truth from someone who works with him." I told him I appreciated it and that I was wide awake anyway. I wasn't going to sleep anytime soon. Then the messages started coming in one after another, and with each one, I felt more and more sick. According to Kyle, Zach had been lying to pretty much everyone. Not just me, not just Amanda, but his coworkers too. He'd created this version of himself at work that made him seem 10 times more important than he actually was. All those stories he told me about leading teams, managing strategy, saving failing campaigns? Fiction. He'd taken credit for other people's work, sometimes just straight up lying about projects he wasn't even assigned to. Kyle said people at the office were starting to catch on. Apparently, Zach had been warned more than once about inflating his role. One of the actual project managers found out he was bragging to others outside the company about running a division, and HR had to step in. He was on thin ice. One more misstep, and he was out. He talks like he's indispensable, Kyle wrote. But honestly, we're all kind of waiting for him to finally push it too far. I just sat there, letting it all sink in. The man who had humiliated me in public, who mocked my job, my body, my presence, who acted like he was doing me a favor by dating me. He was lying to everyone the whole time, and not even doing it well. I thank Kyle for telling me. He responded, "You didn't deserve what he did. None of it. He's been fooling people for a while now. I'm sorry you got dragged into it." After the call ended, I set the phone down and stared into the dark room, heart still pounding. All the times I let him talk over me. All the times I let him make me feel small. I believed he was someone accomplished, someone I needed to impress. And the whole time, I was more honest, more real, more grounded than he ever was. The next morning, I was still trying to piece myself back together when my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail at first, not ready to talk to anyone. But something made me check the message a few minutes later. It was Zach's mom. Her voice was cheerful, almost giddy. "Hi, Mia. Just wanted to confirm that we'll be seeing you at Zach's birthday dinner this weekend. He said you two had something big to announce, and we're all so excited. Let me know if you need anything, sweetie." I just stared at the screen, completely still. My stomach flipped. I replayed the message twice just to make sure I hadn't misheard it. But no, that's what she said. Zach told her we were still together, that we were coming to his birthday party, that we had some big announcement. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it broke something loose in me. After everything, the dinner, the public humiliation, the breakup in front of his coworkers, the Instagram post pretending I wasn't there, leaving me with a $340 check, the lies to his friends, to his colleagues, to me, he was still lying. Still twisting the story to serve himself. Still using me like a prop in the world he built out of nothing but arrogance and ego. I texted her back. "Yes, I'll be there." No smiley face. No heart emoji. Just that. I wasn't coming with a gift. I wasn't coming with a card or a smile or some performance of the sweet, supportive girlfriend I used to be. I wasn't coming to play along in whatever fake narrative he was spinning now. If he wanted to pretend I was still part of his life, fine. I'd show up. Just not in the way he expected. Amanda came over that night with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we sat on the floor of my apartment going over every last detail. I told her about the call from Zach's mom, about the ridiculous lie he'd fed her, and about how I wasn't going to just let it go. Not this time. Not after everything. Kyle joined us over FaceTime, sitting at his kitchen counter with his laptop open and a tired but determined look on his face. He had the receipts, messages from Zach in the office Slack channel where he bragged about leading the Q2 campaign, even though Kyle and 2 other actual managers had run it without him. Screenshots of Zach claiming he was on the road for business, when he had simply taken PTO to go binge drink with his cousin in Oregon. Even photos Zach had posted to his Instagram with fake geolocations, captioned London meetings, while he was very much in his apartment in sweatpants, playing Xbox. Amanda had screenshots of texts he sent her months ago, telling her to hype him up to me when we started dating. He literally asked her to say he was a rising star in the industry. She never did. She thought he was joking at the time, but it was all part of the performance. And then there was his LinkedIn profile. We pulled it up, and Kyle just shook his head. He says he's a senior project lead. That position doesn't even exist at our company. He made up a job title. We organized everything into a neat little folder on Amanda's laptop, labeled with the date of his birthday dinner. Emails, text messages, screenshots of posts, even a PDF export of his LinkedIn in case he changed it later. I printed a few of the most damning ones and slipped them into a small envelope. It didn't look like much, just a few pieces of paper, but it was everything. We weren't going to yell. We weren't going to throw drinks or cause a scene. We weren't even going to raise our voices. The plan was simple. I would go to the dinner, sit down, smile, and let him think I was still playing the part. Then, when everyone was relaxed, when plates were full and the wine had started to flow, I would quietly slide the envelope across the table and say just one sentence. I thought your family might want to know who you really are. No drama. No explosion. Just the truth, calmly laid bare. I wanted him to feel the shift. I wanted him to watch his carefully constructed lie unravel with his mother, his siblings, and his colleagues sitting right there. Not because I wanted revenge for every cruel thing he'd said, though part of me did, but because he had humiliated me in front of people he respected, and now it was time for him to sit in that same spotlight. Only this time, he wouldn't be the one holding the script. The night of the dinner, I wore the same navy dress from the restaurant, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. This time, I didn't wear it to impress anyone. I wore it as armor. I arrived right on time. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, tucked inside a historic brick building that tried too hard to be elegant. Zach's family was already seated at the long table near the back, his mom, his dad, his younger sister, an uncle or two. They looked relaxed, sipping wine, laughing, passing around appetizers. When I walked in, Zach looked up and went completely pale. He didn't stand up, didn't say my name, just stared, like he was seeing a ghost walk into his birthday dinner. His mother, still cheerful, waved me over. Mia, sweetie, come sit by us, she said, patting the chair beside her. I smiled and walked over, calm and unbothered. I sat down and placed my clutch gently on the table. Zach hadn't said a word. His father poured me a glass of wine and asked, "So, tell us about this promotion. Zach mentioned it last week. Sounds like a big step up for him." His mom chimed in with a bright smile. "And the big news you two are going to share? We've been dying to hear it." That's when Kyle entered. He was dressed neatly, in a simple blazer, holding a brown envelope. He looked like he belonged there, confident but not dramatic. He walked straight to the table and said, "Sorry to interrupt, but I have some urgent documents for Zach." Zach's face drained completely. His mom turned to Kyle and said, "Oh, are you one of Zach's co-workers?" "Yes," Kyle said without hesitation. "I work with him in the marketing department." She smiled. "He tells us you all just wrapped a major campaign. He said he led the team." Kyle nodded once, calm as ever. "Actually, no. That campaign was led by our senior manager, Marcus. Zach's role is administrative support." A pause. A long, crushing silence. Zach's dad looked confused. "Wait, so what's his actual title?" Kyle didn't even blink. "Administrative assistant." No one said anything. You could have heard a fork drop. Zach looked like he was going to choke. His mother turned slowly toward him. "Is that true?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just reached into my bag and took out the envelope Amanda and I had prepared. I slid it across the table to his mother. "I thought you might want to know what your son's really been up to," I said quietly. Inside were the screenshots, the fake geotags, the Slack messages, the phony LinkedIn titles, all of it. Zach just sat there, frozen, while his parents began leafing through the pages in disbelief. No yelling, no chaos, just the truth. Finally, quietly, publicly, I stayed calm. My voice didn't shake, and for once, neither did my hands. After his mother flipped through the first few pages in the envelope, I spoke. Quietly, clearly. I told them about the dinner, how he invited me to meet his colleagues, how I spent money I didn't have to look presentable, how he mocked my appearance the moment I arrived. I told them about the comments, the humiliation, how he made jokes about my job, my body, how he called our relationship a favor in front of people I had never met. I described the moment he broke up with me at the table and left me with a $340 bill like I was nothing but a stranger who wandered into the wrong evening. No one interrupted. No one defended him. Then Kyle took out his phone and opened the screenshots from their office group chat. His voice was just as steady as mine. He showed them Zach's messages bragging about running the Q2 campaign, followed by his co-workers replying with jokes, clearly mocking how much credit he took for other people's work. Kyle scrolled to the message from their boss, gently correcting Zach after he posted about leading a project he hadn't even been assigned to. He passed the phone around so they could all see for themselves. Zach finally found his voice, but it came out strained and frantic. "You're twisting this," he said, looking at his parents, then at his sister. "It was just emotions. I had a stressful week." She's making it sound worse than it was. But no one jumped to support him. His sister leaned forward, placed her elbows on the table, and said, "We've suspected for a long time, Zach. The stories never made sense. All the business trips, the big campaigns, the way you talked down to people, it never added up." Zach stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair. "You're all jealous of me," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You're jealous because I made it. Because I've actually built something and none of you can stand it." Then he grabbed his wine glass and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, sharp and loud, the only real explosion in the room. The whole restaurant went quiet for a moment, and then someone in the back murmured something to a server. Zach stormed out without another word, leaving behind his plate, his phone, and the birthday card someone had placed at his spot. The glass on the floor sparkled under the soft light. No one followed him. His father was still sitting beside me. He picked up the envelope again, looked at the pages inside, then turned to me and said, calmly, "Thank you for the truth." I just nodded. The cake came out about 10 minutes later, candles unlit, name written in chocolate across the top. His mother quietly asked if we should still cut it. His sister shrugged and said, "Why not? We're all here." And that's how we ended the night, eating birthday cake without the birthday boy. No one spoke about Zach again. They just passed the plates around and made quiet conversation, like they had all been waiting for the truth, and finally, it had arrived.